POP stands for persistent, which means always hanging around. Organic, you can see what that means down below. It's carbon-based. And these are made by man. These are things that chemicals that humans have put together in a lab for all kinds of different purposes. Okay, persistent organic pollutant. And they're persistent because they're strong chemically. We made them that way. We want them to last. But that means they don't break down in the environment very quickly. So when we dispose of them, that can become a problem. When they do break down, they're toxic. So when animals ingest them, they can bioaccumulate and biomagnify. So you can see some of these. We identified a long time ago that DDT and a pesticide was poisonous. That was Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. Really kicked off the whole environmental movement. There you can see there's polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. A lot of these are found in plastics. Different plastics we know have very slow breakdown times, and it's those carbon-based polymers, petroleum-based, that fit this category. PVC pipe. You should wear a mask when you cut things like plastic pipes because the dust, the pieces that come off, are poisonous to you. You really should not breathe that stuff in. We have something called endocrine disruptors. You can see they can mimic hormones. They can kind of copy what the roles of hormones do in your body. And so they can make the balance of hormones go up or go down in a particular gland. A lot of these are herbicides and pesticides that we now have linked to hormonal issues in humans. They don't have to necessarily mimic or change the hormones. They can block hormones. They can disrupt them or interfere with them. And there's where you see the heavy metals. Lead, mercury, zinc, AS is arsenic. All right, so what do these endocrine disruptors do? If you mess with your hormones, that can affect pretty much everything in your body, but specifically your nervous system, major reproductive issues. So you want to avoid any contact with this stuff if you are pregnant or nursing. And then it can actually lower your immune system as well. And here we see lead again, right? Lead was in Senegal, we see deaths of children. What we're looking at here, encephalitis, is a swelling of the brain. So that's your nervous system. And that's from exposure to lead from batteries. Flint, Michigan. You've probably heard a little bit about that, right? It's been a few years now, but they actually just charged the governor, the former governor of Michigan, for being negligent in this case. But what they did in Flint was they changed where they were getting their water from. They were trying to save some money, of course. Now you have to remember, a lot of the pipes, especially in the East Coast and Midwest, these pipe systems, these plumbing systems are over 100 years old, many of them, including right here in Indianapolis. And all the old pipes are made with lead. Now, it's still safe because there's a coating that is built up over the years that prevents the lead from getting into the water. The problem, though, is that we require certain chemicals to keep that all in place and functioning. And they left one out. It's called an anti-corrosive, so that the metal doesn't break down. That, once again, to save some money, they left the anti-corrosive out, and all of a sudden, they basically poisoned their entire community. They literally were pushing lead-filled water into the homes. The water that came out, you can see, was even different colored. A lot of people knew not to drink it, but unfortunately, Flint is a very low economic community, and people didn't have money to buy filters. There's racial disparity, big time in this case. This was more than just a lead in the water case. It had to do with old infrastructure, politics, economics, and of course, government cover-up. Such a powerful environmental justice case. So here are some POPs that are also endocrine disruptors. There's a fantastic movie that is called Dark Waters. Highly recommend you watch that if you are into environmental justice. It's gonna upset you. It is tough to watch, but it's really well-made film. It attacks the Teflon industry, that coating they put on pans to make it non-stick. Well, they discovered many years ago that as those pans get old, pieces of the Teflon, which are called PFAs, they can break off, and then humans ingest them and they're toxic. So it finally was banned. And you might say, oh, but we have nonstick pans at home. They have changed what they use to make that coating. BPAs, this was another one that was huge in the news because they were making baby bottles out of it. It's a type of plastic. And when you put this plastic in the dishwasher, if you wash it 2-3 times, it starts to break down. And so people were using these bottles over and over and over, and they were releasing endocrine disruptors. Cannot be used for water bottles, any type of drink cup holder bottle. It also is banned in toys. You cannot use BPA in toys because kids put them in their mouth. Okay. So once again, these materials degrade over time. They then bioaccumulate in our systems and eventually lead to cancers. Atrazine is a weed killer. Now, we always have to be careful when we take results of a study from an animal that's not a human and we try to apply it to a human. And it's difficult to test it because we can't test on humans. That's unethical. And so drawing those physiological comparisons can be a challenge. But we believe that this chemical leads to major disruption of sex hormones. And it can cause things, as you see, birth defects in that picture down below, hermaphroditism, which is where they have both reproductive organs of male and female at the same time. And we even have some overwhelming evidence of complete sex reversal. It stays in the environment up to 15 years. And Europe, which is much more progressive and has better regulations than us, they have banned it since 2004. But not in the US. We use 80 million pounds of this stuff per year. And it is mostly used on corn crops. Guess who grows the most corn? Right there. We are ground zero for atrazine use. You have probably been drinking it your whole life. Now, the EPA has set a limit of how much is allowed in groundwater, and they have to remove enough to get to that limit. But most of the scientists involved with this say that limit is too forgiving and that it needs to be stricter. Of course, that means more money to get it out. The best thing you can do is to use home filtration or to buy water that is filtered. Reverse osmosis is about as good as you can get. We're calling this, the activists are calling this 21st century DDT. We know it's bad for us. We just can't get it out of the market. And one of the main reasons why is that the company who makes it contributes major money to politicians to make sure that this stuff does not get banned. Particulate means particles, very small. And I wrote PMX. That's how they usually identify this in studies and experiments. So they use capital P, capital M, and then the subscript would be the size in microns. So PM10, for example, would be those little yellow circles you see. Now, if you look off to the left, that big gray chunk is the width of a human hair, 50 to 70 microns in diameter. So when we get down to PM10, right, we're fitting 5 or 6 of these across a piece of human hair. These are really, really fine, small particles. And we can measure things much smaller than that, of course. We can get down to 2.5 microns, 100 nanometers, right? We're going exponential here. And that's where we learn to use words like ppm, which is parts per million, ppb, parts per billion. When we describe how much atrazine is allowed in the water, we describe that in units of ppb. How many parts per billion is acceptable? So we'll be coming back to those kinds of notations next week. Great examples of particulate matter. Anything that is burned. When it goes into the air, it doesn't actually just disappear. Those chemicals are present. They're just present in very small form. Here is a haboob. This one's in Arizona. It's dust. A haboob is a dust storm. Amazing footage, right? Now, the crazy thing here is that they're pretty harmless, other than you don't want to breathe all that in. They're going to drive right into the middle of one here and watch day turn into night. You can breathe, you can be even outside in it, and it might sting a little bit depending how strong the winds are. But it's just a dust storm. It's not going to really damage much or kill anybody. But you don't want to breathe in all that particulate matter. Isn't this crazy? It goes completely black in the heart of the haboob. Yeah. Volcanoes produce particulate matter. They release significant amounts of ash. In fact, we know volcanoes can create what we call a nuclear winter, where they block out the sun. This one used to be used in lots of construction materials, insulation in walls, tiles and floors, and ceilings. Just very common in construction until we realized how bad it was for us. Now, just being in those materials is not bad. It's when you remove those materials and you kick up dust and pieces of them. If the tiles were to break, you would be at risk of inhaling asbestos. But look at the microscopic version of asbestos. Do you see the little barbs on it? The little sharp pieces? What happens to your lungs when they interact with those barbs? Well, it sticks to your lung tissue. It stabs you. Unfortunately, this is another company who covered up knowing the health risks. Johnson & Johnson has been paying millions in lawsuits the last couple of years as it was finally revealed that they knew asbestos was in their baby powder. I know you've heard this. There's memes about it, mesothelioma. If you've been a victim of mesothelioma, please contact our offices immediately. Mesothelioma is the cancer that is caused by asbestos. Okay, next category, thermal pollution. We've already talked about this a little bit, but power plants are a great example. That's Michigan City, Indiana, Lake Michigan. This cooling tower exchanges warm water from the coal plant with the cool water from Lake Michigan. And these are the steel mills up by Gary and Hammond. And the water just looks different. You can tell. The ecosystems are not healthy, and it's because there's a lot less oxygen due to the warmer conditions of the water. Thermal means heat. Noise pollution. There are obviously long-term consequences of being around huge noises, but a bigger issue with noise pollution is in the migration of animals. We can disrupt flight patterns of birds. We can disrupt in the ocean, anything that migrates in packs, especially, or uses echolocation.